Okay, students, in this video, we're going to start covering simulation. So in this module, this first video will actually start with the component itself. So we're going to cover all of these points up until extrude, which is what we'll be using for creating that main component. So of course, creating a drawing, using the drawing tools, dimensioning, geometric constraints, and then finally an extrusion. Now with extrusion, I'm going to show you a new method today as well. And then in a second video, we'll cover simulation in a lot of detail. Okay. Now, the things to keep in mind is we're still going to create a fully defined sketch. The sketch itself should be fairly simple. So just remember the things we need to do to fully define a sketch, right? So position X, position Y, size, and angle. And let's get started on Fusion. So here I have a brand new file. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and save it. Notice how I'm going into that new folder. And then I'm going to call this bracket 1. Okay. Now I'm going to make sure that my units are inches. So switch from millimeters to inches. Hit OK. And then I'll go ahead and start my first drawing. So what I'll do here is I'll start off with a square. So I'll start off with the origin and then go to the right and down, and then make sure that this square is 5 by 5 inches. Okay. Now again, remember here we have fully defined sketch because we have a position X and position Y because this corner is starting or touching the origin. And of course we have sizes and we have angles, horizontals and verticals and all that good stuff. Now what I'll also do here is I'll start a second rectangle. So type R, and then I'll hit this bottom corner and then go up this way, and then this second rectangle, it's also square, so it should be 4 by 4. Hit enter, and again notice how it's fully defined, fully constrained, everything is there, so I'm good. Now what I'll do is I can either finish the sketch and then look for extrude, or I'll just type E on my keyboard and I'll select only this L shape that we create. Okay. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to introduce a new concept called symmetry. So here for my direction, instead of just going to one side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do symmetry or symmetric. You can also do two sides where you can put different distances for both extrusions on either side. In my case, it's going to be the same. So I'm going to do symmetry, and then the extent is still a distance. Now we have for symmetry two types of measurements. We can either give it a number for half the length, or we can give it a number for the whole length. Now it doesn't really matter which, just as long as you understand which one we're given. And then for my distance, in this case, I'm going to do half length, and then for the distance, I'm going to do 3 inches. Okay, that means that the total extrusion is going to be 6 inches because 3 inches are going to the right of that plane and 3 inches are going to the left of that plane. Okay, now of course this is a new body, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now what I'm also going to do here is I'm going to introduce a new tool. I don't think we've used this one before, but it's called the hole. You can also go into that mode by typing H in your keyboard. Now what I'm going to need to do here before I create holes is first I need to set up the location of where I want the holes to go. Okay, so I'm going to make holes in this new surface. Now what I'm trying to do here is I'm creating a bracket, an L bracket for a for this this activity, where my L bracket is actually this whole activity is actually based on a video from one of the I believe he's one of the instructors from the Autodesk Academy. So he made a video about a very simple simulation, So I sort of adapted his activity, and then of course I sort of came up with the dimensions and everything. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna use this L bracket to simulate a bracket being actually put up on a wall, and then of course some loading being applied to the top here. But in order for us to do that, we need to actually define some holes for the bracket to be actually hanged on the wall, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to create a sketch. I'm going to select this new surface, and then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the create menu, and I'm going to look for point. So what this is going to do is this is just going to create points in that sketch. Okay, so I'm just setting or defining the locations that I'm going to later on use for the hole tool. Okay, now the holes or the points here, they're not defined, right? So they're just sort of sitting in that plane for that sketch. But what I need to do is I actually need to define the distances for those points. That way I can actually set everything correctly. So that distance there has to be 1.5. So x from the edges has to be 1.5, right? There you go. And then y from the edges has to be 2. Okay, so there's one, and there's the second one. So 2 and 2. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and finish this sketch. And now I actually have those 2 points within that sketch that I can now select as locations for the holes. Now, also notice that before the points were white, whereas after I define them, they turn black. So again, that's sort of similar to the blue or black lines in sketching. So once they turn black, that means that those points are fully defined, fully constrained. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and jump into the hole tool, and what this is going to ask me is it's going to ask me for the placement. So it's either asking me for the surface or the sketch point. So in this case, that's why I created those points. So I'm going to select that first one and then select that second one. Now notice how these points are way too big. Okay, so we're not gonna really keep it like that, but just sort of bear with me as we make some adjustments. Okay, now before we adjust the actual dimensions, let's first talk about the types of holes we can create. So with this tool, we can create a simple type of hole. Now this one's really nothing too complicated or new, since we could have created that hole type by doing a circle and extruding it, right? We've done that before. But in this case, I'm going to actually do a little bit more complicated type of hole, which is either a countersink or a counter bore. Now those two types, you will see them usually when people are machining stuff. You'll see that sometimes for the holes they want to do a counter bore or counter sink. That's usually to allow the different bolts or screws to sort of remain flush with the surface, okay, while still allowing for that extra surface to apply pressure downward. Now in this case, we're gonna do a countersink type of hole, but again, we're still gonna adjust some of the values here, and then we'll see what happens. So here we have this little nice diagram that allows us to visualize everything that's going on for all those different values that we can adjust. And then what we'll do is we'll start with a couple of them, and then we'll carry forward. So first, the total, the depth of that hole, it doesn't really matter at this point. It's set at 2.1. Let's just bring that down a little bit, but it shouldn't really make too much sense since we're still going to go all the way through the material. And then here for the outside diameter of the head, we're gonna actually set that up to be 1. And then the angle, both angles here, we're not gonna actually mess with those, so those should be good. 82 degrees for the top and 118 for the bottom. That should be good. And then finally, for this bottom part here, we're gonna change that 0.9 to 0.75. So that's gonna make the inside diameter a little bit smaller, and of course it's going to allow us to have a little bit of a bigger bevel or angle, if you will. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Once we have all of that set up, then you can just hit OK. Now make sure that when you're adjusting these values, you don't press enter, because that's going to automatically save the rest of the stuff and will automatically exit this mode and create the holes. So if you're like inputting different values, make sure you either click for the next one over or press tab, and then that way you don't make a mistake. Otherwise, you'll just probably have to start again. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and hit OK, and I just created these new holes right here. Okay. Now again, the reason for that is just so I can have another extra surface to actually place some constraints in the simulation to allow us to simulate the loading correctly. Okay, that's pretty much it for this component. Again, it's nothing major, nothing complicated. We'll just sort of carry forward with this activity. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop this video here. Make sure you save this component, and then in the next video we'll actually jump into simulation, and then we'll talk about all the things we need to do in order to correctly simulate one of these loading conditions. Okay.